Why, hello there, Meditechers. This is Megan Jackson, your friendly social media strategist, and I just want to introduce you to our new episode of Meditalks Live, 7 Habits for Successful Online Students. And before we get into our daily spiel, or not daily, but pretty often spiel, I did want to give y'all a few updates in regard to what's going on here at Meditec. Just to let you know, Court Observation Week is a huge thing that is coming up. It is going to be from October 13th to 17th, and you may be wondering exactly what Court Observation Week is. Well, let me tell you. Court Observation Week is a week where you can shadow a legal professional. We have been partnering with our instructor, Anna McNatt, and she is basically giving us her time and letting us partner with different legal professionals where students can, go and actually shadow a professional during this week. So if you're interested in doing that, you can definitely sign up. There is a link, if you're watching the live broadcast right now, there is a link in the Showcase app to your left. But also if you check our Facebook page, there is a link to a fantabulous blog post that has the podcast where Anna explains pretty much what Court Observation Week is all about and how you can get involved. And then also, if you check out our blog, so meditec.com/blog or facebook.com/Meditec. Also, on top of that, next Thursday we will be having a medical office management webinar with our instructor, Dawn Moreno. She'll be basically going over our medical office management program as well as what that career field pretty much entails, as well as billing and coding, because what is actually one of our top programs is medical office management with billing and coding. So it's a program where you take your medical office management course, which is made up already of different courses. On top of that, you also take your billing and coding courses. So she's going over that. That's going to be a super awesome webinar because, like I said, it is one of our top programs. And I did want to say, have you noticed that I'm in a different room? We have a new soundproof room, so hopefully this will be my new Meditalks Live home, and it looks super spiffy, so I hope you like it. But other than that, another announcement, the Q&A today, I wanted to do a little bit differently. So once I open it up for Q&As at the end, instead of, well, if you have questions, you can of course ask me anything that you'd like, but also provide your own suggestions as far as tips for being a successful online student. So if something works for you and you see that I haven't really mentioned it, go ahead and let me know, because that's how we're all successful, right? We all work together in order to make each other successful. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and jump right on into the tips. I don't have a presentation today, so maybe I can add some titles when it's actually added on to YouTube, but I'm just going to go over some tips that I personally use and have also kind of scoured the internet for as well. And we also got a lot of feedback from both of our instructors and our students off of Yammer as well. So tip number one, which is one of the biggest ones, is use the first few weeks getting organized. You want to start off your course definitely on the right track, right? So if you take those first 2 weeks, you get enrolled and it takes about 15 days for you to actually be able to start your classes. That's the perfect time to say, hey, I need to definitely get my planner ready. I need to plan on my courses. And what's really interesting is that you'll actually receive, if you are currently a Meditec student, you'll definitely receive a study guide from John, who is our registrar. And even though you can pretty much take courses, it's a self-paced program, you can take it whenever you want to, but it does provide suggestions so you don't just feel overwhelmed with 10 courses with 20 modules each or something like that. He actually breaks it down for you. But what I really, really highly suggest is taking that study guide and putting it in a format that makes sense to you. And that can either be a digital format or a physical format. I know a lot of people, obviously really like iCalendar or Google Calendar or something like that, but there's something with me where I really like the physical writing down of things, because if I don't physically write it down, it doesn't really stick in my head as much. And then also, for some reason with screens, it just when I look at a calendar on a screen, it doesn't really click with me as much as when I have it physically on a piece of paper. I'm not sure if that has to do with just the act of really writing it down in the first place, but I've just noticed that that's what works with me a lot better, and it, like, I remember my dates a lot more if I have a physical thing. And obviously that's not everybody, but I would definitely highly suggest kind of thinking yourself like what would work best for you. But definitely get that planner, and it can be something as simple as this. Maybe you don't really need like a really spiffy planner, and I think this might be backwards on your screen, just FYI, but you can definitely just, there's like calendars online where you can just print something out and write it down yourself. Instead of getting like a nice fancy spiral or something like that. But personally, I would actually spend the money on the actual planner, just because that's what keeps you on track more than, you know, just a piece of paper or something like that. And so what I personally suggest, and a lot of other students suggest as well, is to kind of have a color coordination within your planner too. So if you have your modules, definitely writing your modules in black, so it's like, okay, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday I need to do module 1, module 2, module 3, or something like that, and it doesn't, you know, stand out as much. You're not as like, oh my god. But what I would say for the important things like your tests or your quizzes, stuff like that, is writing your assignment due dates and your test in red, so it's very easy to see. And also red just kind of ignites this like, oh crap, I need to pay attention to this. But then also another thing that I would also say to include, because a lot of our students either work or they have kiddos, there's other things going on in their lives that really, you know, may alter your study schedule or your class schedule, is writing those really important dates like play dates or maybe birthdays or what else, like dinners or something like that, in blue. Just so you know, maybe doctor's appointments. That's actually a pretty good idea. Doctor's appointments is a better example. Writing those in blue so you can be like, okay, well that day I may need to like adjust my schedule a little bit. But just having that color coordination and spending that time on it really can get you grounded and get you started off on the right foot instead of like right when you're supposed to start your classes. So you should spend those 2 weeks where you're kind of waiting for your classes to start, really just sitting there and getting organized. Another suggestion, it's still part of tip 1 though, is, you know, getting folders and spirals. Even though you're an online student, it's definitely important to make sure that you have the right resources, just because of the fact that you know, physically writing things down, like I said, can really, really, really help you. And also, like, it doesn't need to be something fancy. You don't need your Lisa Frank folders or anything. Like here I have a nice, like, manila folder. I know it's kind of beat up. Don't make fun of me. But this is definitely something that you can use really easily and just, you know, mark your class or something like that. So if you wanted to, say, billing class or your coding class or something like that, you just use a manila folder. But keeping things organized and separated instead of like big wads of paper can be really, really helpful, because just having physical things organized can help you organize those thoughts inside your head as well. So, you know, if you just have study materials all over the place and they aren't in any sort of order or consistency, how are you going to make the thoughts or the intake of that information organized and consistent in your head? So that's tip number 1. So tip number 2, I would also really highly suggest creating personal deadlines ahead of time. So if you're definitely one of those people that tends to be a procrastinator like me, I'm not a super bad procrastinator, but definitely do procrastinate. But I would definitely suggest, say if you have a test maybe on Friday or a paper due on Friday, having it in your head to have it ready by Monday, the Monday before, is definitely a good thing, because then when you procrastinate, you're like, oh good, I have this whole week to really work on this. And the way I like to think about it is, like, if you set your clock about 10 minutes early, that's definitely what I do. I have my car clock set, you know, 10, maybe like 15 minutes early, because otherwise I'm always late, and I've really noticed that it has definitely helped me get to places on time. So maybe that is also something that you can do. It's not just relevant to deadlines for your class assignments, but if you're one of those people that just runs late time-wise, you could definitely set your clock a little bit early, of course. Let me see if I had any other notes on that part. But yeah, I mean, pretty much that's, I feel like tip 1 and 2 are just ways that you can really get started those first weeks and get yourself in the groove and kind of keep that momentum going while you're like, yeah, I'm starting classes. And then once you actually can start your classes, you can just go right on into them instead of just like, oh crap, I'm completely disorganized right now. But so tip number 3 is have a designated time and place to do your coursework. Sorry, I keep looking down. I got my notes down there. But I would definitely highly suggest before you start your classes is picking your place. So having your designated time, just like any sort of student, any sort of brick and mortar student who's going to a physical campus, even though you're an online student, you definitely need to have a designated time to do your studying, because otherwise it's really easy to put it off and put it off and put it off. And then also to have that designated place. So that could be, you know, your desk if you feel like you're not a person who gets really distracted, or it could be a coffee shop or a library. You know, make sure that you have those places that you want to go to, and maybe change it up a little bit too, because I know that you know, studying can be really daunting and really boring, obviously, but if you change up those places, it's actually a really good way to you know, liven things up a little bit and make it feel not so tedious. But I would really highly suggest claiming that study space, saying like, these are the places that are intended for me to study at. I shouldn't be doing anything else here. When I sit here, when I go to this place, my body should realize, hey, I am here to study. I'm not here to play games. I'm not here to do this. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to focus and study. And I would highly suggest that this not be your bed. I know your beds are really comfy, and I love to study in my bed as well, but I have read a lot of recent studies that show that when you study in your bed, it actually increases the likelihood for you to have insomnia, which you really don't want that, because insomnia, and when you sleep, that's when you actually start solidifying those thought processes, or those, you know, synapses that have those little memories of, you know, the material that you're going over in class. So when you study, after you sleep, it solidifies that, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But if you go to your bed and you're studying all the time, like I said, you go to a place and your body says, okay, boom, this is what I'm supposed to be here for. Well, you don't want your bed to be the place where your brain wakes up and you're like, crap, I need to study. So you need to definitely make sure that you try not to study in your bed, even though sometimes I know it's super easy and sometimes you just don't want to get out of bed. But I also would like to say that maybe this needs to be around somebody else's schedule, because I know a lot of our students are parents, or they have other jobs or something like that. So definitely make sure that you take that into account. So maybe that your study time needs to be during nap time and after your partner or after your friend or roommate comes home, so they can help you watch your kiddos while you're studying. So that could either be called a study buddy, and maybe that person could also help you study once your kiddos goes to bed, but it could also be your accountability buddy. So if you need somebody to kind of be like, okay, did you do your work today? You know, kind of talk that out with them beforehand and say like, hey, can you really, like, you know, push me to make sure that I get my work done, and kind of help me, you know, watch the kiddos while I'm studying, because otherwise they can be pretty big distractions, but you know, they could probably be really cute distractions as well. Okay, so that's tip 3, and tip 4 is to pinpoint your distractions. So figure out what distracts you. So if you were in school before, maybe in high school, maybe you did a little bit of college, maybe a little community college or something like that. sit down and be like, okay, what distracted me before when I was studying? Was it because I had the TV on all the time? Did I not have the right music on? Did I, always have somebody bugging me in the background? Did I have my phone next to me all the time? Pinpoint those distractions and eliminate them. But then you should also, like I said before, is, indicate what also helps you, because some things may be distractions, but some things may also help you as well, make things or make studying not feel quite as daunting. So changing up the place that you go to, or changing up the music that you're listening to. I personally really like music that doesn't have lyrics in it. So if there's music with lyrics and I'm listening to it while I'm studying, it just starts to blur into what I'm reading or something like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, this song is like super awesome, instead of actually studying. So find a good artist or something like that during the few weeks before you start your classes that you feel like you can study with. I personally really like Fortet. I don't know if anybody's really listened to them, but they're a really cool kind of electronica band that isn't, it doesn't have like a lot of lyrics in it. But then obviously some people really like Mozart or some classical stuff, and you can even just go onto YouTube, like I did, like I said, in two Meditec's live episodes ago. They have like 2-hour versions of songs that just keep going, or like whole albums, so you can just say like, okay, I'm going to study during this whole like YouTube video. So maybe that could be like your timer, like, okay, I'm going to start this and that's when I'm going to study. And then also, like I said in that episode, there are plenty of apps that can block you from certain websites. So if you just Google like block internet apps or block social media apps, there's definitely a lot of websites that suggest different apps that you can use in order to block like Facebook and Gmail and YouTube, etc. while you're studying, even though you still need the internet to actually access your classes. So that's always the really tough part about the online student, is that you don't necessarily always have like a lesson in a book where you can just like throw your computer off to the side and be completely far away from it. You're very tempted. So a lot of these apps can block this stuff, for 8 hours. They can block specific sites. Like maybe you want to block Facebook versus YouTube, because maybe you use YouTube to find videos that can help solidify information. That's something that you can also do. Know your resources and know which sites you actually want to block. And you can also do it the old-fashioned way. Maybe if you are reading your book or something like that, just unplug that router. Just, router, I'm going to put you in timeout right now. But yeah, I definitely think those are some really, really handy apps that really help, not just online students, but any student, or anybody who's working who gets distracted by the internet. So that was tip number 4. Tip number 5, know your study needs. So just because you're an online student doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be studying like a brick and mortar student who goes to physical classes. So just realize that you really need to study, and it doesn't mean that everything has to live on the computer. You may need to invest in something like note cards or journals and spirals. And I actually didn't say that in the resources before, so I said maybe folders can help, but I would definitely also suggest getting a notebook for each of your classes too. So just like a small spiral or something like that. I personally like to have everything very divided instead of like, here, I'm just going to mush all my notes together. Like I said, if you have study materials that are all over the place, then your thoughts in your brain about that subject are going to be all over that place, or not just about that subject, about your coursework in general. So just being physically organized can help you be mentally organized. But this also, I have to admit, is a little bit biased because, like I said, I work a lot more, or I personally work a lot better with the physical organization or the physical studying. Like, physically writing things down helps me retain information, where some people like to type, or some people like to make note cards online. Like, there's plenty of apps where you can just type in your note cards and they actually flip for you. But I've noticed, like, for instance, when I took like art history or French or something like that, having physical note cards where I wrote them, I didn't just like print stuff out, I actually wrote the word and flipped it over and wrote the definition, or had the artwork and then put all my notes about the artwork on the back. The actual making of the note cards helped me personally retain that information, where I feel like when I do something on the computer, I don't retain it as much because my fingers are just kind of typing it out really quickly, and I'm only thinking about, oh, am I spelling this correctly? So another trick that you can do is that if you write something, I know this isn't a journal, but if you have a spiral and you actually write your notes, when you're studying for that test, is just to take these notes and retype them. And this may be for courses where you're like, oh, I just need like a slight refresher. It's not a really in-depth study method, but I've noticed for things where I just needed like short refreshers, it was really, really, really helpful that way. And it actually forced me to, oops, sorry, hit my mic. It's actually, you know, forces me to look at all of the notes rather than kind of skimming them, because I'm like, oh, I can read this page and just study it, but really it's like, who looks at a page that they've already written and kind of really retain all of the information and look at each bit of it and kind of make that wrinkle in their brain about it. But yeah, so tip 6, study in small bursts and avoid cramming. And I have to explain this because this has to do with the way that your brain works, and I found this was very interesting. I learned this when I actually went to UT and was a mentor for college students. The golden rule is that when you have an hour of class time, you should spend 2 to 3 hours studying. And I understand some classes you probably don't need to spend that much. Obviously, you can use that as a rule of thumb or like an average, but you should definitely think of at least spending the same amount of time you're in class studying that material. And I know that can be a little overwhelming, but you know, just maybe set aside a Saturday or something like that. But you should definitely not just set aside that Saturday right before the test, because the way that your brain works is it just retains information a lot better when you do things in short bursts. When you sit down and you try and shove all of this material in your brain at one time, it's really, really difficult for your brain to retain all of that information. It's kind of like you have a bucket, or let me think, what's a good example? Yeah, kind of like a bucket with a hole in the bottom of it. If you pour a ton of water in it at first, it takes a while for it to drain out and, you know, go into your long-term memory. Say this is like your short-term memory bucket. So, and if you keep pouring, it starts to overflow, right? But if you do short little bursts, you're able to, you know, get that information into your long-term memory, siphoned into your long-term memory better, because that's just literally how your brain works. And that also has to do with sleeping as well, because sleeping is actually a time, like I said before, when your short-term memory is being transferred into your long-term memory. So the more, literally, the more times you sleep between you like study things, like if you study and then sleep and then study and then sleep, you're able to retain that information a lot better, rather than because you're able to kind of like, you know, look at all of those details in what you're studying and retain it, rather than, you know, having 8 hours of studying. Obviously, you aren't going to remember all the details of what you studied if you spend 8 hours in one sitting studying stuff. But yeah, I just always thought that that was really interesting, and it just has to do with, you know, the makeup of our brains. So definitely set aside a study time, that time to go over what you did in class. So say maybe Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 are your times where you work on your modules. Well, then Tuesdays and Thursdays and maybe Saturdays or Sundays should be the time when you go over what you did. So from what I just said, I think what would really work is Monday, Wednesday, Fridays going over your modules, Tuesday, Thursdays spending an hour or so studying what you did the previous day, and then Sunday you could look over what you did for the whole week. But yeah, I mean, I know that sounds a little bit daunting, and you obviously can figure out exactly what works for you, but I think personally for me, just from personal experience, that's what works best for me. But yeah, so, and then tip 7, which is also, I started with a super important one, getting organized before you start your classes, and I'm going to end with a really important one. So ask for help as soon as you need it. I'm going to say that again. Tip 7, Ask for help as soon as you need it. There are no stupid questions. There is no need to be embarrassed. This is what we at Meditec are here for. So if you're in a class and you just don't get something, ask a question on Yammer. Send an email to your instructor. Maybe even talk to your admissions advisor and see if they have any resources. And I know for sure the instructors have resources for that stuff. But we are here to help you. And if you are stuck, you know, the first week on learning something foundational that, you know, you have to build on in order to be able to learn, you know, next week's material or the material after that, you should ask questions about it. It builds up. So do not ever, ever, ever feel intimidated. And if you don't ask a question, that's the hard thing with online students, is that you can't hope that somebody else asks that question, like when you're in a brick and mortar school. Like you could sit in class and you go, oh, I hope somebody asks that question. Oh, that was my question. Somebody answered that. You're an online student. Not everybody else is going to ask that question. Maybe you could scour Yammer, our little study guide, or online study groups. But the chances of that, I feel, for an online student is a little bit lower than a brick and mortar student. But anyway, those are my 7 tips. So what I'm going to do is let y'all kind of get your questions going. So if you don't remember, if you toggle up to the let me restart. The Google Hangouts kind of changed the layout of how to change between things. So if you go to the top, I think it's your left corner, there's a square with a bunch of different squares in it, and you can toggle between the Showcase app, which is all the links that I have provided, it should be up right now, and the Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Q&A really quickly. Okay. So if y'all have any questions, or if you have suggestions, I want to know what worked for you. Let me know what study tips you have to suggest for your fellow students or fellow online students. But otherwise, I'm going to go over a few things really quickly. If you are looking at that Showcase app still, realize that Court Observation Week, again, is October 13th through 17th. You can shadow a legal professional. The deadline is this Saturday. We may extend it, but we have already 2 students, so I'm super, super excited about that. So we'll definitely be working with them, you know, getting pictures and letting people know how it goes. This is the first time that we're really doing this, so I'm super, super excited. And Anna is amazing, so I'm sure that she'll get a lot of students signed up for that. But also, like I said before, let me first back up. So if you want to sign up for that, the Showcase app has a nice little link that you can click on. Sorry, I can't talk today. In order to sign up, and it also has a link to the podcast if you want to listen a little bit more before you sign up and listen to what Anna has to say about what the week actually entails. Realize you only have to do a half day or a full day. You don't have to shadow the entire week. And then also next Thursday, the Medical Office Management webinar with Dawn Moreno. So definitely check out that, because I will be on there with her talking about one of our top 10 programs. That's actually one of our most not important, our most favorite courses, most popular. That's the word I'm looking for. But yeah. Any questions? Any suggestions? I don't get any. I don't have any. So I'm going to double check our Google Plus page, because sometimes that happens. Have that up. Okay. Okay. Well, it looks like people don't have questions, or the app is malfunctioning like it did the first time that we did a Meditalks on air, or Meditalks live, sorry. So I'm going to round it off there. We'll definitely post this in a blog post. I'll have more detailed information in the blog post. Oh, now we have time. Or now we have a suggestion. Mitzi is saying, family study time has worked for me in the past, where my kids and I would all sit down together as a family and study. Ooh, I'm going to +1 that, because that is awesome. that is like a really good idea. I think that's really important, and that's a way to get your kids kind of involved as well, because sometimes it's like, okay, kids, I need to leave you alone, or you need to leave me alone while I study. That's a way to incorporate them and kind of have family time while you're actually studying as well. I think that's a really, really good idea. I'm going to include that in the blog post. Any other suggestions? No? Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you, all of you Meditechers, for joining me today from Meditalks Live. I hope to see you at our webinar, and I hope if you are interested in joining us for Court Observation Week, you get signed up and you get to meet Anna, because she's amazing. Anyway, hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. I will see you next time. Peace!